attendees are still arriving, so we'll go ahead and get started. And we have a relatively full agenda with some overviews of our organization and the technical work that we're doing, as well as overviews of the specific work each of our working groups has been working on. We'll give a little bit of information about how to join IAMTS and how you can participate in this progress. And then we have some time for questions and answers at the end. So with that said, I will go ahead and turn it over to one note. We are recording the presentation because we had some people during our last opportunity recognize they still weren't going to be able to make this one, and so we wanted to make that available as well. So I'll turn it over to the IAMTS Executive Committee Chair, Mr. Alexander Kraus of TÜV.
Well, thank you, Pete. And again, just to be sure you can hear me properly, I hope.
Yes.
Good. So that's nice, because in the last membership interest meeting, I had some IT issues, but obviously I have been able to solve this, and I would like to welcome everybody. Thank you for your time and interest in IAMTS and joining our session today. And not only as the chairman, but also as an employee in the senior management of TÜV Süd, a global testing inspection certification company, I'm totally convinced that what IAMTS is doing is kind of a paradigm change and groundbreaking. And I'm looking forward to introducing you today with Georg List, the chairman of our Technical Leadership Committee, and also in the name of Professor Dr. Wu, the Vice Chairman of the Executive Committee, and he's the head of CATAC from China. So I'm looking forward to introducing you into IAMTS. So Pete, please let us jump to the next slide, please. So as you can see, IAMTS became a pretty powerful setup just looking at our members. And not only, but particularly, I would like to highlight the first line you can see on that slide, because what is, I think, a real USP, so something very unique we have with IAMTS, is the collaboration between standardization and inspection and certification institutions such as VD TÜV from Germany, being the head over all the TÜV companies, which I'm representing as well, one of those TÜV organizations. We have CATAC from China, SAE, pretty well known from US as an international standardization institution, as well as IEEE, DIN, and not to forget AVL and NVIDIA as technology companies and service providers, also being strategic members of IAMTS, contributing with real technical and methodological know-how. And I will not read every single member, but you can see that global setup, which I believe is the second USP of IAMTS. It's not only this number of global standardization institutions that are collaborating, but we are globally balanced. So we want to make sure that we are not promoting one particular region. We want to create meta standards and best practices that can accelerate standardization, which you will see on the next slides. And one thing also to mention, today I had a call also with Klaus Estenfeld from ASAM. So we also make sure that what IAMTS is doing is synchronized with other important association and alliances, so that we make sure we are not creating something in contradiction, but we across the whole value chain, we're making sure that automated and connected driving can come true. Next slide, please, Pete. So what the mission and the vision of IAMTS is, we want and we are creating an accepted framework that contains testing scenarios, validation methodologies, certification methods, as well as the required terminology in order to accelerate and harmonize standardization to release automated vehicles and connected vehicles. The interesting and the very important point here is as well, we are doing this as a community. So we are sharing best practices among our members. We do this in working groups. You will see this a little bit later as well, with the objective to really globally harmonize and accelerate the development of guidelines and standards and certification methodologies for automated and connected transportation. Next slide, please. So the problems we are aiming to solve and we are addressing through our working groups as well as through our governance structure is, first of all, we need to manage the growing complexity of potential risks by using and deploying automated and connected vehicles. And we need to clearly identify what needs to be tested and how to do the tests, how to conduct the tests in order to prove such connected and automated vehicles safe. We need to close that gap of that we have in terms of lacking globally harmonized standards and regulations and approaches regarding testing and validation of those vehicles. And not to mention, but also pretty important, we need to match the evolving technologies, which I would say is more or less a function of physical borderlines. Some things are physically not possible, and budget that is invested, so investments done to develop technology. This is going on pretty fast, and we have to say, looking back into the last 100 years of automotive technology, this is a revolutionary what happens in terms of new technologies in the subject matter of automated driving functions. And secondly, we need to make sure that the standards that are the, let's say, guidelines to deploy such technologies, that this is matched in terms of development speed. If we don't do this, technology development is expensive and will become into a bottleneck in terms of scaling those developments into business models, releasing automotives or vehicles, automated vehicles, just because of the lack of globally harmonized standards and guidelines. So we do this by ensuring comparability and replicability of tests across test facilities globally. You will also see here some additional information later. It will be presented by Georg. We need to make sure that test data is portable and compatible across different test institutions, facilities, and setups. Of course, we need to validate simulation fidelity because automated vehicles cannot be validated as it is done usually in the automotive industry just by physical testing. We need simulation tools and methodologies, and we need to optimize simulation versus physical testing so that we can shift the majority of validation tests into the virtual world. Next slide, please, Pete. The history of IAMTS, and this is what I would like to show, because at the end, success comes not only because we have, I believe, the right idea and understood what the issues are we need to address, but it's made by the right people being together. And in 2018, we had the idea of founding this as an alliance that you saw works on defining best practices. We had several meetings where we defined the charter, the governance structure, how to get this started without a single dollar of budget, but getting the right partners in from the beginning and over some milestones. And you see, we always try to be also here regionally or globally balanced. We met in China, we met in US, in Germany, in Europe. And today, going to the very right side, we are ready and we are already doing published publications of best practices and technical papers, which we started this year or end of last year, speaking precisely. And only within this year, we will have around 12 more events where we are going to publish and speak about the results and work content of IAMTS. So next slide, please. This is our committee governance, and I would like to highlight two things. First of all, the executive committee. Again, this is a number of, I would say, let's call it technology neutral institutions that are publishing the content of our working groups and guiding developing the strategy and making decisions for IAMTS. And this is pretty important for us, that we do not promote any particular technology and we do not promote any particular region, but do this globally and technology neutral. The second thing I would like to highlight is the members of our executive committee and technical leadership committee. All of those people you see here are high-ranking people with influence for not only in their institutions, but also in the community of automotive globally and standards environment. Like I mentioned, Professor Wu as the vice chairman, he's the head of CATAC. John Tintinelli representing SAE as our secretary. And we are closely collaborating with Klaus Estenfeld, who was the managing director of ASAM. Now he's the executive consultant of ASAM, still being deeply involved in both organizations, IAMTS as well as ASAM. We have Georg List, who will speak later from AVL as our technical leadership committee chairman. The vice chairman of the technical leadership committee is Konstantinos Karachalios, board member of IEEE. And last but not least, our working group leaders, K2 from TÜV Süd, Bolin from CATAC, Tobias Düser from ADL, and Eddie Lazarnik from Cybellum. You will hear them speaking a little bit later as well. And as I said, success comes from the right people coming together. All those people mentioned here are doing this IAMTS efforts next to their daily jobs, but it shows again how important and how sound the work is, because this group of people, plus our members in the working groups, are contributing on a weekly base into IAMTS. Next slide, please. Our way forward in this year, and this is the key actions from my perspective as the executive chairman. First of all, of course, it's a membership-based institution, so we gain membership and budgets to develop ourselves, but also content through a sound membership base. And we are about not only growing our membership base with additional members from different industry sectors and around the globe, but this year our objective is to onboard OEMs, so vehicle manufacturers, and we are in close contact with vehicle manufacturers from Japan, from Korea, from the US, from China, and from Europe. So this is one of our tasks this year. Secondly, of course, we develop content and we keep developing content. You will see more about this a little bit later. As I said, introduced by Georg List. We publish whatever we create. We make sure that we are influential. So you will also see later that also UNECE takes reference to IAMTS work already, and we will back that up by many publications this year. I believe Pete will show you later where we are talking and presenting. And last but not least, on the very right side, this is pretty important. At the moment, IAMTS is still a program under SAE ITC based in the US, which was fantastic for us to get mature and have a pragmatic way of starting with an idea into a sound organization. But within this year, we will spin off SAE ITC and found IAMTS into a non-profit entity in Vienna. So it will become a non-profit legal entity, totally independent in Vienna, in Austria. Next slide is, I believe, already the slide where I hand over to Georg, and which I'm doing.
You will. You will if you want to or not. Thanks, Alex.
It's your stage, Georg. Go on.
Oh, great. Hey, great for the thanks for the introduction. Thanks for the opportunity to speak here on behalf of the Technical Leadership Committee. And as As Alex already said, I'm speaking for Konstantinos Karachalios, my co-chair, and I've also seen that Hermann Brandt from IEEE is on the call. So we have a technical leadership committee that drives forward the content creation and the thought leadership from our membership to bring together the know-how we have, the practices we have, and also the insights we have, what is going on in different regions. And I will hark back to what Alex already said. So I think the key strength of our technical work is that we are combining different stakeholders, and there is regulatory stakeholders, there is tool stakeholders, there is users, there is experts of proving grounds, there's proving grounds themselves. So we have a very broad coverage of the stakeholders. We have big companies, we have actually non-for-profit organization, we have small startups. There's also a very different mix of dynamic and innovation cycles that we bring together. And thirdly, it's this cross-regional coverage that really, I think, provides value to our members already, because we have technical discussions where people can discuss how are things done in China, how are things done in the US, how are things interpreted in Europe, what can we do about Japan, and what are the practices there, et cetera, et cetera. So bringing together these different types of views informs our technical work. And I'll start with, never to do, but Pete, if you can go one ahead, start with a process. Bad idea, but I have to do this. Because what is important is that these stakeholders obviously identify for themselves, for their own purposes, challenges we have, and challenges we all face in order to come to validation of automated vehicles. And by sharing these challenges, we also come up with lots of ideas what we can work on. Now, we started out with 2-3 teams that I'm going to present some time ago, to work on real challenges that I think you will recognize and we're all facing globally. But there is a process to come up with new ideas, to come up with new working groups, and one of those has been formed already, and one of those is in formation as we speak, because there is obviously new challenges coming up and things where we think our membership together can provide insights for standardization organizations, also for the industry, share white papers and best practices that will bring us all, as members, but also the industry forward via harmonization, via standardization. So the process is, I think, a pretty straightforward thing of coming up with an idea and from our stakeholders, and then forming a project and creating critical mass around the project, and then transferring that into a working group that actually then starts to create output and publish that output, speak at conferences, be represented at in the standardization committees like ISO, like UNEC, and so on, where we can bring in this content. So if I may go one further, I will briefly introduce the working groups we've started so far. The 5th working group I'll keep a secret because I don't want to divulge everything today. But it's an exciting working group that we're going to start shortly. But I'm going to do the superficial thing. Fortunately, we have lots of our experts. So the team leads, Bolin from Qatar is going to talk about working group 1. I understand Sebastian will talk about, Sebastian Herke will talk about working group 2 and introduce himself briefly. For working group 3, Barnaby Simkin from NVIDIA will speak, and from working group 4, we have Eddie Latsebnik from Cybellum, who will introduce quickly the content and where we're at and what we're heading for. But if you look at the topics, right, that these 4 things address, in the validation of automated vehicles, obviously we're facing the issue of what is a scenario-based testing. And there is a lot of thinking that has to go into what is a scenario and what kind of scenarios do we need and how should we share them. And so there has a team formed that realized across regions and across different stakeholders and different use cases, actually very different databases and scenario information has formed. And so they looked at what is there and what can we learn from the differences between regions, but also what can we learn from for the application of databases and for a forward-looking view to make sense and make use of the heterogeneous environment that we're sitting on. So Bolin will talk about that later on. Then, so this very much goes into the definition of what is a scenario and how to deal with it and how to do it and how to capture it in the database, etc. The second working group deals with the real test beds, the proving grounds, the hardware, the driving around with autonomous functions and validating them. So what we want to do is we want to create, first of all, an overview of big proving grounds that are out there, or test beds, as whatever you may want to call them, to capture what capabilities they have, because it is very difficult to look across the globe and find the right proving grounds where to test your test program, or to compare capabilities, or also for proving grounds to offer their capabilities into other regions. So step one was looking at creating a database, and then you can already see once you've captured capabilities of proving grounds, then you go into also ascertaining that these capabilities are there and are to a certain level. So that at a certain point in time will also go in the direction of what does it take to certify proving grounds to make sure that they are comparable across regions. Third working group, as Alex has already said, simulation is already a fact of life in validation of autonomous driving. Now, but it's not so easy to realize. And while we have many tool specialists and simulation specialists and users on this team, we also wanted to think about what does it actually take to validate, a simulation tool chain. So a simulation tool chain needs to be connected to, needs to be correlated to real testing, needs to have high fidelity to what is going on in real life and when I drive around on a proving ground or on a real road. And that I need to validate. I need to make sure that the simulation tool chain stays high fidelity, stays correlated. And so Barnaby will talk about a framework how to do that, and they're working very hard also with different standardization organizations to bring that in, publish the paper with us, etc., etc. And the fourth working group is the mega topic that Eddie brought in, the mega topic being cybersecurity that concerns all of us in all ways of life, but especially in the context of autonomous driving and the testing and validation of autonomous driving. It takes on a different role, a different meaning, and also a certain gravity, because there's so many vectors that the ADAS systems allow you to get into the car that you need to make sure that you combine the testing of autonomous driving with cybersecurity testing to make sure that autonomous systems are robust, are resilient, and are secure. And so Eddie started out with this working group, and will give you ideas of the scope of this working group and where it's heading. So these are the four. There is more to come. With new members, we also very often look for new ideas, for new intuition, what else we can do. And it's also something that, for new members, we obviously want your participation in these working groups to bring in again different views from different stakeholders, different practices, and make this whole work that we do richer. With that, I think I will, if we turn one page, then I think I will turn over to Bolin. Bolin,
thanks.
can you hear me?
Hello?
There you go. Perfect.
All right. Hi, everyone. So thank you, Georg and Alex, for all the introductions. So I will continue with the train of thoughts of what Working Group 1 is doing. So I'm Bolin. So I'm working for CATARC. CATARC is short for China Automotive Technology and Research Center. So we are, we basically have the similar role like TÜV in the European and, you know, SAE in the US, and we actually do mostly the similar job. So this working group, as Georg was mentioning, is about global testing scenarios, and we're looking for the similarities and differences of that. If we go to the next page, Pete. The thing we're doing basically, right, so there are differences which we've been conquering from that, for, you know, from day one. We've found there are many differences are existing in different regions. You know, that could be the simple difference in ODD. So we're going to talk about, you know, different road types, especially, for example, the roundabouts in the UK, which is quite a pain sometimes for people in other countries to drive around. I was driving in the UK, and also there are different kind of reasoning of using different kind of scenarios. And, you know, we're talking about how aggressive are people driving in different regions. You know, we can talk about a cut-in situation in China, which I just did a research on. It's about like very small TTC. Normally we're talking about TTC like less than 0.5 seconds, which is quite minimum. And those kind of things could appear influences on different kind of regions of standardizations and, of course, in regulations. And also other part of safety assessment, you know, how do we do that? You know, when I was driving I'm driving a European-made car, and sometimes we can definitely, so one of the situation or one of the scenarios I met when I'm driving in the road of China is that we have really close light poles. The light poles are made of aluminiums or, you know, made of steel, and they definitely give reflections on radar. And every time I'm approaching a certain type of light poles, and they just give me the wrong signal, say, oh, you're approaching a car or something, and that really bother me sometimes. So those kind of things are, you know, very small concrete ideas, but we should talk on a higher level how those things can be covered on a scenario level globally, and that's why this scenario library is quite crucial to a lot of people around the globe. So that's one thing. And second thing is, once we have, so the situation for that is now, you know, we saw that, we have that, you know, say how do we implement them? So this is then we can use all the scenarios descriptions and scenario kind of library. Then we'll discuss how do we do it in a test case. That's what we call a back-end development process. And then, of course, at the end of the day, all those kind of gimmicks we have in scenario database, well, kind of this kind of situations in the scenario database. Then we talk about how do we to verify systems. That's the higher level where majority of the people, stakeholders are interested in that. You know, how do we verify them, and how do we conquer problems from learning from the scenarios and to improve our system and improving our DDTs and ODDs, right? And so that's the basic for the working group. And go next page, please. Then, so what do we do? So most of the time, we're basically just trying to show what kind of situation scenarios and what kind of stuff we're doing in each countries in each region. So the major players in the working group 1 are basically CATARC representing China mostly. Then, of course, IAMTS City, which is institutes actually based in the US, and also AVL and TÜV, they're actually based in European. So those things are being developed a lot. Then we talk about how do we conquer them, you know, from bottom up, which is, you know, how do we use all the kind of simple ideas, simple gimmicks, simple tricks, and trying to understanding the bigger real world scenarios, and or, you know, top level down, which means once we have all those kind of attributes in ODDs, once we have all those attributes of known scenarios, how do we extend the boundaries of them? How do we test something are not been tested before, and how those things can be involved in different ideas? So that's kind of the thing we're doing. And most of the discussion in Working Group 1 are actually done by the end of May, which is the deadline I'm actually being set up. Then basically this month I've been busy editing the paper, and those things will be publishing very soon. But that's also a very good point for most people who are actually interested in Working Group 1. That also means this is a very good time for starting new discussion, new ideas, and new topics we're relating this idea, which I think Georg also mentioned a little bit about scenario-based testing. How do we use this to empower, enrich, for example, simulation testing, ground testing, and how do we link actually with Working Group 2, Working Group 3, which, how do we choose the best, proving ground globally so we can basically test those scenarios out. And also for the third one, how do we found out what's the best kind of mix and match between virtual testing and actual physical testing. So go to the next page, please. Basically, this last page was going to be the wrap up of what we actually had. And there are a lot of things being discussed. And one of the things IAMTS will do very much is basically promoting in many different kind of events. And that's kind of basically we are targeting TRB. And actually, I'm writing this presentation right now, just earlier as well. And this thing will be rolling out. So for me, jump outside of Working Group 1, from a China's perspective, people from working here. This is a very good platform as in, how we basically exchange information on a global level. For me, I think IAMTS is a very good place where you can basically contribute to the methodology where people are doing differently, of course, and also I'm pretty sure most of the people who are actually involved in this kind of, this ADS testing and these simulation testing, they had their own database, which it's a very foundation of most of the people. But the thing is, those things need to be shared in a way that people are not then those things can be discussed on a high level. And also, lastly, once all those things are settled, the idea of how to use them, how do we use the scenarios, how those things can be implemented, how those things can be done on a high level, then we can see how do we implement them in different tools, different kind of databases or different sources. How do we mix and match, and how do we do verification, validation? And that's everything I have for Working Group 1. If you have any questions, please just either shout out later, I think, or basically you can just text in Teams.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Yes, the paper was 60 pages long in the beginning. No, Bolin is working on it. There is lots of content there. It is impressive. So now the challenge is to get it to an absorbable level, right, Bolin?
What's going on?
It's like La Vaca Frida is closed, huh?
Okay, we can just make sure everybody is muted. All right. Well, our next speaker was scheduled to be our working group lead, Dr. Kezu, who is also of TÜV Süd, along with his co-lead, Sebastian Herke of Circuit Booking. Both of them, it seems we're having issues getting onto the call right now, but this is how we support the organization, support each other. They're ready to back up. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed and start with the slides for Working Group 2. And hopefully, I think is trying to dial in as we speak. So as you saw with Working Group 1, and you'll see in Working Group 2 and 3, 3 and 4, a lot of our work is on underlying technology and the testing associated with them. But the proving grounds themselves are an important part of this testing and validation ecosystem. And we have members who operate proving grounds, who design proving grounds, or have other elements in the running of proving grounds. And so we have a working group is working on that area as well. And one of the things that they determined is that in this global challenge of developing, testing, and eventually safely deploying automated driving systems and autonomous vehicles, the ability to get on to a proving ground that has the capabilities that are required and that can represent the different and we're joining one. Nope, not K. All right. That represents the unique driving of the that particular region, is an important thing for either a technology provider or an OEM. So our current project in Working Group 2 is we've already developed the database and now working to populate it to a level that has sufficient number of entries to be a useful tool for our members and the general industry, is a database of closed testing grounds and then eventually onto open proving grounds. And Could just joined, so maybe I can hand the baton mid-run here to him.
Yes,
and he
thank
can
you,
pick
Peter.
up
Sorry
from there.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can
Yes,
hear you well.
perfect.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
good.
Sorry very much. I have some traffic problem and therefore sorry for that. So I think Peter has already started with the introduction of Working Group 2, and so in our working group we are focusing on two issues. So what we are now developing, one is we wanted to, based on the current standards and regulation, to develop some specification in which we want to describe the testing facility of proving grounds. And the proving grounds including the closed proving ground, but also the open testing areas. In the first step, until now, we are focusing only on the closed proving ground. And using this standard of let's say, defect standards, how can we describe the testing facility of proving grounds? We are now developing, or we are implementing, a database in which we registered the global data proving grounds in our database and described their, let's say, tracks, their testing facilities using the standard features and attributes. So the next slide, please. Here you can see some screenshot of our current implementation, and we have already registered more than 76 proving grounds in our database. And we have defined, let's say, the attributes in different catalogs. For example, on the right side, you can see the vehicle types in which proving ground we can test them, the cycle length, the communication technology, and so on. So we are also now writing a white paper, and we believe we will publish in the next weeks. In this white paper, we have consolidated more than, I think, 35 standards. And there we have also, let's say, done the catalog of the attributes. And in the meter, you can see there are some graphic demonstration of the proving grounds. And there are also some filtering functionality and help the, let's say, our database user to find the proving grounds very easy. So then next slide, please. We see several stakeholders could be contributed in our working group, but also get the benefit from our work. First is the testbed user, like the OEM and the tiers, yeah, and because you are developing the advanced system and the components, and we will help you combine with the ODD description and to find the right testbed for the specific testing need. And we believe also in the future, the testing scope will be quite wide, both in the physical world, but also in the virtual simulation world. Therefore, I think with our database, you will have you can do the configuration of closed regional and out of regional validation program. In which that you can, let's say, one side isolated your testing and validation process, on another side, let's say, spend as a cost. And the testbeds, so this are our main stakeholder, and I think the testbeds are until now quite far away from the, let's say, the vehicle testing requirements. Yeah, and in our working group, we will help you to have a close look about the current and the future requirements on the on the vehicle testing, and we want to close the gap between the, let's say, the requirements between the requirements for the vehicle testing and the requirements to the test beds. And we are also, let's say, help you to have a deeper understanding about the standards, regulation, and the trends, and help you to improve your, let's say, testing facility. On the other side, I think until now, a lot of proving grounds they have, or you have invested a lot of cost in the to build the infrastructure and so on. We believe in the future, the test beds should be networked more and more with each other, and to build their own unit selling point, and through and build some, let's say, aligned testing program in which will also support the test beds user. For the technical partner, I think you will find more and more business opportunity in this context, because this is a new area and this is a market is growing, and the test beds need your support, need your equipment and the testing methodology. And therefore, I think we can see also some synergy between test beds and the technical partner. From the regulation and certification perspective, I think until now the test beds are not, let's say, in this regulation strongly linked with the regulation and certification topic. And in the future, that's also one background why TÜV we are also investing in this topic. We want to improve the quality for the testing, and the quality will be done, high quality testing will be done one side from the method perspective, on another side also on the location perspective. Therefore, we wanted to using the existing standards and regulations, and to develop our specification, and to help this area to improve their testing quality. On another side is one potential benefit you will get is through our contribution, you will get also the certification, which will be, let's say, help you open the gate for the wide testing by the test bed user. Yeah, so and that's the main four stakeholder we think you can contribute in our working group, and you can get the benefit from our working group. So the next slide, please. Oh, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ke. And we have Barnaby Simpkin from NVIDIA. Barnaby, I saw you in.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
Hello.
Go ahead, sir.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Barnaby Simpkin from NVIDIA. Replacing Tobias Juser from AVL for today's overview of Working Group 3. So Tobias is the working group leader, but I'm say an active participant and happy to support IAMTS in these presentations. If you go to the next slide. So NVIDIA's only been members of IAMTS, I would say, less than a year. And already in that year, we've sort of met a number of fairly major milestones, and we can see already how much of an impact that this working group with IAMTS is having with standardization bodies and regulators around the world. So as a first step, I think this was start of this year, we gave a presentation at the UNECE. This is the UNECE's working group on automated driving systems, and specifically the group that's looking at how automated driving systems are assessed and how virtual testing fits within that. So we gave a presentation there. I think it was Tobias who gave the presentation, and it was very well accepted from a number of stakeholders during the meeting. And as we will sort of discuss later, the foundations of the current UNECE guideline for automated driving and how it's assessed is built around the inputs that we gave as IAMTS. So a relatively small group, but having significant impact on how automated driving is regulated in the future. So we gave a presentation at UNECE. We've also published an article in the Assam SIM Guide on the perspective of the IAMTS stakeholders. So an official publication there that was released a few months ago now. And also, in addition to the presentation we gave at UNECE, because that was just the highlights of the work that we have done as a group, we also published best practices. And this is best practice for how virtual testing tools may be validated and how that data can be used to support ADS certification. This best practice paper is, from my perspective, sort of the first that I saw on this topic. We'd seen guidance from regulators on very high level approach of how virtual testing tools may be used to support your type approval, but never really digging down into details about how that sort of overall process can be used when you assessing tools, complex tools with multiple models and multiple tools, how they can be used to assess complex electronic systems like automated driving systems. So it was certainly the first that I've seen, and we go into details about how to prepare your tool, how to set requirements on the tool, and what levels of fidelity are appropriate for your tool, and depending on what the tool is exactly used for and what domain the tool will be used in. So describing processes and setting a framework for manufacturers to derive requirements for their tool chain, and then going into processes about how to actually do the physical validation, and not just validating the vehicle on a sort of complete integrated system level, but also looking at validation on the individual subsystems and the sort of vehicle system level. So fairly comprehensive methodology for how to validate your tool chain. We didn't just prescribe specific thresholds for correlating sim versus real data, because I mean, the exact correlation threshold depends very much on the tool chain and what it's being used for. But over the next few months, we aim to dig down into a bit more detail about what correlation thresholds could be appropriate, what fidelity levels could be appropriate for certain aspects of your virtual testing tool, and sort of do a sort of take two, I guess, of this best practice with a bit more detail. And we've got two working groups within two subgroups within this working group that are looking at two very specific aspects of the tool chain validation. And we hope to generate some data and further develop that paper. As I previously mentioned, the best practices in the paper, in addition to the presentation at UNECE, has been the fundamental building blocks of how UNECE plan to regulate virtual testing. So I'm very impressed to see how we've just gone from a presentation to having a really strong impact on regulation. If you go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, we published a best practice, and I'm sure Peter or anyone else would be able to provide a link if you haven't received it already for that best practice. I think it's publicly available. As I mentioned, we've established two subgroups. There's one subgroup that's looking at validating LiDAR sensor models with respect to faults. We've got participants from CATARC, Viadyne LiDAR virtual vehicle. And then we've also got subgroup 2, which I'm participating, is NVIDIA. We've also got 3D mapping and retrospect. The output from these two subgroups and the next iteration of the best practice document, we plan to present at the ITS World Congress in October this year in Hamburg. And then I'll briefly cover what we're doing in those two subgroups very quickly. Go to the next slide. So with the LiDAR sensor model, we're at the start of the work at the moment. We're looking at analyzing the ODD in which the vehicle will be operated in. We're using the ALKS use case. So this is the automated lane keeping systems that are only to be used on highways below 60 kilometers an hour, analyzing that ODD we're generating specific requirements for the LiDAR model itself, and then looking to parameterize certain aspects of that model, making sure it is appropriate or has high enough fidelity in order to inject faults, classify faults, and see how the model reacts. So it's a sort of a very, I guess, specific aspect of the virtual testing tool, but a very, very important one. Here's the next slide. Next slide. This is the other subgroup. We're looking at validating lane models that are used in the virtual environment. With the work with the input from 3D mapping, they've mapped out a lot of roadways in the world. NVIDIA has also used that to create a virtual environment in our virtual testing platform. We'll be doing physical tests and virtual tests to compare the outputs of not only the camera models, the virtual and real camera, so looking at perhaps the contrast ratio between the lanes itself in different environmental conditions, at different angles, etc., but also looking at how those changes in the environment and the fidelity levels of the model, of the lane models, impacts the lane detection algorithms. So we're doing sort of two steps on the validation of the lane modeling. We're looking at the physical characteristics and looking at the visual properties of the virtual and real lane, comparing them basically side by side, and then seeing, because I mean, it could, for a human, be visually representative, that's fine, but what impact does it have to the camera system and the lane detection algorithms? So doing a sort of two-tier validation for the lane models, and trying to come up with a conclusion around what is the minimum level of fidelity for the lane models that are used. Do you just have to have the correct sort of visual representation of the lane itself, or do you need certain properties or reflectance of those lane markings? So digging down to a bit more detail around what a lane model, as a minimum, what a lane model needs to consist of for these lane detection algorithms, and then maybe also looking into a bit more detail about if these lane detection algorithms are used for only a lane departure warning, is your correlation threshold lower than if it was used for a lane keep assist system or for a lane centering algorithm used as part of an automated driving system? So sort of looking into a bit more about how that lane detection algorithm would be used and how that would impact the correlation threshold and our validation strategy. Again, all of this work we're going to be doing over the summer and providing inputs. We want to have a next version of the document, I would say, towards the end of summer for review within IAMTS, and then to present at the ITS World Congress in October. And once again, from my perspective, I mean, I've been in the group less than a year. You can see a huge impacts that we're having on the industry, and we also see regulators actually looking to IAMTS for more information, because typically the people in the room with these in the working groups with regulators aren't simulation experts or aren't the same type of experts that we have at IAMTS, and we're in a very unique position to sort of get these minds together to think about how it could be used in regulation and sort of have those sort of two perspectives. And I'm looking forward to sort of delivering the work at the end of the summer. I think it's going to be very beneficial, not only for us as industry, but also for the regulators as well. And I think that's everything from me.
Well, thank you. We'll move on to working group 4, and actually I think we've got the lead on here, Eddie from Cybellum. So I will hand the baton to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, much appreciated. But actually, after Georg's presentation previously, I think that I only can take it down from here. So maybe I will skip this time. So hi, everyone. Nice to meet you, and and I'm glad that we already get some interest here from Jennifer. So hopefully by the end of my talk, the rest of you will jump on the train as well. So next slide, please. So I assume that as you are all automotive executives and in automotive domain, you probably have heard about WP29. WP29 is a UNEC-driven regulation that comes with plenty. Just a second here. Yeah, the air conditioner is a bit too loud, so sorry for that. So WP29 is a regulation, a UNEC-driven regulation that actually requires or is mandatory for any OEMs that are willing to sell new models in 2022, which is actually around the corner. And that makes cybersecurity not a hobby anymore, but actually something that people have to be compliant and regulated by. And that's a huge opportunity for companies like Sabellum and for IAMTS to provide testing best practices and testing suggestion, recommendation about how testing should be done. So here's a brief description of what WP29 is about. It's about cybersecurity management system and about flows and organizational structure, but there are technical validation, technical evaluations that has to be testing that has to be done as part of WP29 compliance. And that's actually the great opportunity for IAMTS. Next slide, please. So, yeah. Thank you so much. So essentially, WP29 is a requirement or relevant in the green part of the world, as you can see, which is Europe, very much in Asia, and what is it, Greenland, or somewhere next to the States. But the important part is that even OEMs that are not coming from the green or parts of the world have to be compliant with that regulation when they are selling vehicles or components to these regions. So even an OEM coming from the States or an OEM coming from China that is willing to sell in Europe or in Japan, Korea has to be compliant with this validation, with this regulation, which actually makes it practically a global requirement. In the green blanks at the bottom of the screen, which is maybe not the best colors to choose, it's very clear that by mid-22, that EU obligation will be a requirement for all new vehicle types, and in 2 years' time afterwards, it's going to be for any type of vehicle. So that's actually very soon and very demanding. Next slide, please, Peter. Yeah. So really brief on that. WP29 is composed of 3 main pillars. As practically any regulation, it comes with process orientation, it comes with organizational documentation requirements, and something that is very important, it comes with practical testing requirements or practical security requirements. And that's essentially the part that withholds the biggest opportunity and the biggest question marks, because how to test it is yet to be decided or yet to be discussed, because there is no clear way or clear decision or best practice about how this last part of security has to be tested and has to be validated. Next. Important part, and that's actually very relevant for what I've said. So I'm quoting here Professor Stefan Wagner from the University of Stuttgart that says that requirements, or actually security requirements, have the habit of not being very precise or clear or concrete about how to be tested. And that's essentially the issue with the WP29, and on the other hand, the opportunity, because currently it is very clear that there is a requirement and a need, but not very clear how to fulfill it. And that's essentially what we would like to a problem that we would like to collectively tackle. Next slide, please. And here's actually what we are planning to do as a working group. So the working group is currently composed of quite a lot of contributors coming from China, Qatar, all the way through Turkey and Europe and Israel, and now in even both Americas. We have people from Brazil and so on. So, and that's utterly important for us because we would like to have coverage in all the potential aspects. We would like to have coverage coming from different geographies, coverage coming from different regulatory landscapes, like organizations that or locations where self-regulation is common, like states, or people, or locations where type approval is very much common, like Europe, and actually to have as much representation as possible from different stakeholders in the automotive domain. And the purpose is actually to identify best practices in the market, and then after analyzing them, to come with the best practices that actually will be adopted as the widely accepted guidelines. So that's actually our roadmap. The first thing that we're trying to do right now is actually to map the existing best practices, and afterwards the next step would be analyzing them to find commonalities, differentiations, stuff of importance. And the last part, which we hope to receive maybe in few quarters time, is actually being able to provide recommendation of harmonized guidelines about how cyber testing should be done to fulfill WP29 compliance. Next slide, please. Something that is very important, and that we do as working group 4, we are the youngest working group here in IAMTS. We do see a huge value of being good neighbors in our neighborhood, or good members to the community, and therefore we do see a value of collaborating with the other working groups. So we do see how the cybersecurity testing can be an integrated part of other working groups. So for example, working group 1, which is actually tackling the test scenarios, we do aim at some point to discuss how cybersecurity test scenarios are included there. And for working group 2, which is actually talking about proving grounds and what are the capabilities there, of course, the cybersecurity element of the testing in these proving grounds, oh, thank you, it's something that we would like to get notified as well, and to understand what is the portion of cybersecurity in these proving grounds. And the last and very not least, we know how that cybersecurity in many aspects actually considered to be simulation per se, but it's not truth. So it's actually, there are discussions about which portions of the testing could be simulation level, which parts has to be on digital twins, what elements has to be on the hardware itself, and so on. So we do see a lot of synergy between what is done in working group 4 and the other working groups in the IAMTS organization. Next slide, please.
And we're back to Georg.
For me again.
Yep.
Yes, exactly. Hey, thanks, Eddie. I think you did a better job of explaining what you're going to do than me. So I'm happy you're on. Okay, and Jennifer still wants to join, I think. So you've done a good job. All right. Next, the next point is a little glimpse together in the technical leadership committee and with work group leads and the bigger community. We've also started to develop kind of roadmaps on where we want to take this and where we think that IAMTS can provide momentum, can provide input into something that pushes topics at the industry level. No, and here you see an excerpt of this very small one, just to look at harmonization of testing infrastructure and testbed capabilities, like Kezu has explained before. He's working on one aspect of that is their specific capabilities. Like Bolin has said, but we're also looking at the scenarios that need to be inserted into testing environments. But what eventually we'll be looking at is also to help push along via MTS and the ecosystem that we have with Qatar and regulatory type bodies, but also certification type bodies, that we can probably come up with something that says, okay, first we'll capture the capabilities. Secondly, we'll develop a network to have harmonized and comparable capabilities, and eventually we can probably take this into some kind of certification of proving grounds, auditing and certifications in the ecosystem. Yeah, not IAMTS itself, but through its members and through partnerships that we have in the ecosystem. So this is a glimpse of a roadmap looking forward. What kind of grandest things we also want to approach. Pete, I think back to you.
Thank you very much. So hopefully these four presentations on the working groups, as well as the overviews by Georg and Alex, have strongly interested you to join in with the collaborative organization that IAMTS is. To introduce, membership, we have a variety of membership levels. We've got a junior level for kind of the startup organizations or smaller companies that we think belong in this rapidly evolving space and have a reduced fee structure. We gladly invite academic partners such as universities to join. I think we've got one of our recent members from Marmara University. Yep, there's Professor Seutert that has joined us today to listen in and participate. And then we've got 3 levels for most corporate members that come with a variety of opportunities for leadership and voting opportunities, with that highest level being our strategic members that have the opportunity to sit on the executive committee, get 2 votes in general ballots, and help direct the strategic direction and technical direction of the organization. Our core members at a lower level of initiation and membership that get 1 vote on those high-level meetings and can lead on the technical leadership committee, and then kind of the base or general members were in the middle. That does have a lower level fee structure for nonprofit organizations too. We're trying to make sure that there's the appropriate opportunity for each of the any kind of company or organization to belong as a member. Another element of this is we encourage participation in the working groups very highly. You can really participate in as many as you can manage with your personnel. These are company memberships and not individual members. If you have a larger company, that can allow you to have representatives across the working groups and spread the work. Obviously, smaller organizations usually focus on one. Working groups on average meet once a week to once every other week for about an hour. Those are done via Microsoft Teams for the most part, and the working groups tried their best to align times that meet the various time zones of the organizations. I know one of the working groups actually shifts back and forth to have kind of an Asia-focused time zone for one meeting, and maybe a U.S. East Coast in Western Europe time on another week to try to share the burden. I know Bowen is on here and Shuai as well today that are enjoying a late evening in China, but on or participating in the meeting. Joining is very easy. We have a simple membership application, which is generally just to gather contact information, your intent to join. We present that to the executive committee to vote and get you onboarded and into the Microsoft Teams channels and onto the working groups. So we try to keep this very streamlined and work for further participation by all. If you have any questions, we're not quite done yet. Yep, sure.
I raised my hand, but I believe since presenting you can't see it. That's the weak point, one of the weak points of MS Teams. But I feel free to interrupt quickly. Since when I'm talking to prospective members, I usually get the question of what happens to the membership fees. Is that something where someone really has a benefit from in terms of earning something or so? And I want to make this pretty clear. I also wrote it into the chat, and that IAMTS is not a business model. So none of us gets paid for it, for contributing. We are not taking any profits out of it. It is a non-profit, and it will remain non-profit. And practically, we are using the membership fees for two reasons. One is it creates commitment. We don't want to have an organization that has super many high number of members and listeners, but we believe good things take effort and need commitment, and this is the first thing. Secondly, even more important, we use the membership fees to run the organization, still at the moment under SAE IDC as a program, but in future as a non-profit entity in Vienna, as I mentioned. So we use the budget to run the organization. We use the budgets to create content once traveling is possible, for traveling, meeting, arranging such subject matters or meetings and come-togethers. And thirdly, to do publications, which also require some effort to do marketing, and all those things that you all know require some budgets. So this is what we use the budgets for, and there's none of us who gets any payments or so. So this is, I think, important. Not that people think we are trying to get you on board to top up our salaries. This is not the case. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, great point. Thank you, Alex. You have the contact information from the invites and such, but just one more point that you can always ask questions to me through the Secretariat email. We also do want to highlight that we have in just a couple weeks our first public, unfortunately still virtual symposium. Looking forward to 2022 and moving this to a live or a hybrid probably organization as well. And as we described before, we've got aligned in two different sessions that kind of go to the different time zones for the interested parties. We have if you check on our website, you can get more information, including the agenda. We've got a number of speakers from inside our organization, but also from outside as well. And although the two sessions will have some similarities, we've got some unique speakers for each of the region sessions. So we hope that you can dedicate some more time in a few weeks to hear even more about what we're doing and the perspectives from members and non-members on this challenge and how we should approach it collectively as an industry. As Alex also mentioned, there are some other opportunities to engage with us coming up. We will be at the new IAM Mobility show in Munich in the beginning of September. We've got some partnerships going on with member Tufsud, who's headquartered in Munich as well. That gives us an opportunity to showcase this. several of the folks have talked about presenting. We've got a panel at ITS World Congress in Hamburg, WICV in China this November, and then in 2022, look for a number of opportunities, ICCVE with IEEE in February. We'll at least have some folks at the Consumer Electronics Show, CES, in January, and also an emerging partnership with South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. So they say keep Austin weird. Well, we're going to help Austin get even more technically advanced. So let me hand this back to Alex for some closing remarks, and as well as an opportunity to ask questions if you haven't had your question answered in the chat.
So please, if there's any questions, let us know. Usually we are aware that such kind of platforms are one-directional information usually. So, but anyway, if there's any comments or questions, just raise your hand in MS Teams, and we will use the time to answer. As closing remarks, so I would like to again share with you from what I started also in the beginning, that IAMTS started as an idea in 2018, and I believe the right people came together, and you saw the membership base we are having, and you saw a little bit, I hope at least you felt a little bit the spirit, how we collaborate within this membership interest meeting. At the end, what we are doing, we believe, otherwise you wouldn't do it, totally makes sense. But as I said, success comes with the right people, with collaboration. And I have to say that developing technology is one thing we all are excited about. And most of us might be engineers, technicians, or people that are somewhat involved with technology. But at the end, technology can only enhance and contribute to this society and to mankind if it is safe and it is usable. And development into technology or investments in technology are pretty extensive, especially in those disruptive technologies. And there's no company in the world, I'm really convinced of that, there is no company in the world that will be able to release level 4 or 5 vehicles, which are probably also connected, get software updates and so on, as one company, as a silo company, globally or in a wider scale in any kind of use cases. It has to be built on collaboration, and that's kind of a paradigm change. We know the automotive industry traditionally is pretty silo, super digitalized and interconnected along the value chain of that silos, but the intercollaboration is pretty limited and will be pretty limited as they are competitors. But I believe to release those technologies of automated driving functions, it's the core functionality of a vehicle, and to automize those core functionalities and the technologies required, we need to collaborate, not only globally, but also across silos, across stakeholders, and we need to make things happen by creating standards and best practices that will pave the way for those new technologies to be deployed into the markets and used by you, yourself, your kids, your spouses, your friends, whatever, and you want that to be safe. So this is my closing remark I wanted to share. I hope we have been able to convince some of you to think of joining us, our great community. We are not only working hard, we are also having a lot of fun, I have to say, and I could not imagine having such a collaboration with so great people around the globe, from China, US, Europe, Israel, Korea, and so on, you name it. So it's also great fun, which we are here for as well, right? Not only as engineers for technology. So thanks to everybody. We will reach out to you afterwards through Pete and through ourselves as well. So thanks for your time and stay safe.
So before everybody departs, any questions? Did get a thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks from my side here from Vienna.
Thank you,
good.
Stefan. Yeah,
And all the best for your collaboration. I think is an excellent network, and I really hope that you get new members coming on board, and we're also ready to initiate things here in Vienna. So looking forward to that.
Thank you, Stefan. Very, very appreciated, and looking forward meeting you in Vienna in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely, Alex.
Thank you, Stefan. All right.
All right. I don't see any hands raised, so we will magically give you back some time on your calendar. Again, thank you very much for attending today. Please send us your questions as they come up, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you as members soon, and definitely seeing you at future events. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.